Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Being the Best Version of Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carey Heller. Today, we have a special guest. Like to welcome Heidi to our podcast.
Hi, happy to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I have been a special educator for the past 20 years, working with families and students. And after that, I sort of had this beautiful breakthrough in a breathwork session during at a yoga studio, and I just felt so led to follow that path and to work with nervous system regulation. And one thing that I really saw when I was working with families and students in the special education field was that parents were constantly looking for ways to help regulate their selves, and in essence also help their kids and their families also come to this state of regulation, because nothing else could really happen if you're not in that regulated state, right? Like kids aren't ready to learn more, they're not able to access anything. So I sort of started my wheels turning in this whole other space. And then I went on to do training in breath work and nervous system regulation, polyvagal theory, yoga, all of the things. And now I'm working as an integrative breathwork practitioner, where I help people use breath work to connect more deeply with themselves, to create presence and nervous system regulation so that they can show up as the best version of themselves on a day-to-day basis.
I agree. Well, thanks for explaining all that and how you kind of got to where you are. I guess let's take a step back.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you mentioned breathwork a couple of times. People probably hear about that a fair amount, but I think a lot of people may not really be quite sure what does that actually entail. So maybe
Yeah.
explain a little bit about what is breathwork, and a little more about kind of what you do as part of that. That'd be really helpful for listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So I think there's a common misconception around breath work because there are so many different kinds, and it's such a buzzword right now that it's like all over Instagram, all over everywhere. And so, from my perspective, there are three kinds of breath work. There's an acute breath work that, like, if you're stressed out, if you elongate your exhales, you can help your nervous system get into that calm, rest and digest state. So those are like a quick band-aid for here and there. Or there's also breath work that you can use to focus. So like my son who has ADHD, we use the breath of fire in the morning to help him upregulate and get ready for the day. So that's one type of breath work. And then there's daily breath work that people use sort of as a way to consistently move forward towards a regulated nervous system and just have that practice every day of coming to center before they start their day. And then there's therapeutic breath work, which is the breath work that I support clients in one-on-one and in groups. And that is a breathwork journey where we use a breathwork pattern. In my case, we use a three-part breath, all in and out through the mouth, a circular breath. And what that breath does is it's able to help people access an altered state of consciousness. And what's interesting about that is that in different MRI studies, they compared like the brain on psychedelics and the brain when doing this kind of breath work, and the same parts of the brain light up. So people are able to go into the unconscious, to the subconscious mind, and release things that are stored in the body, because we can't solve a problem from the same place we created the problem. So I love talk therapy, a big fan, been in it a long, long time. But sometimes things get stored in the body and we need to work somatically to get them released from the body and then process them through in a talking way. And so the therapeutic breath work is able to go into the body because we know that the body keeps the score. And it's a beautiful way to be able to move deeper into that work.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for explaining that. It's definitely
Yeah,
really interesting.
yeah.
And I think to highlight something you mentioned, it sounds like because they're different, or essentially different situations where you use it. Sounds like some of it is kind of, proactive, preventative to kind of, get ready to focus for the day. Others is, kind of, I don't know if reactive is the right word, but sort of, help with for things in the past.
Yeah, exactly right. And I
Um,
think also like for I used to teach a lot of breath work to the students during the day at school. And so that's where sort of that acute breath work, like for to spot treat things would be so helpful. to take a deep breath before you respond to a classmate, or if you're feeling nervous about something, there are different breathwork patterns that are more helpful in those different circumstances.
Okay. It sounds like, from what you described, certainly you work with people that have a wide variety of issues. It sounds like including ADHD. I would imagine anxiety is probably quite common.
Yeah, exactly right.
Do you have any strategies for listeners on, yeah, how to, for people that may have a hard time with executive functioning, how
Yeah.
they may be able to get started, with doing some of this stuff on their own? Obviously, there are a lot of benefits of, working with you or someone like you, but I think in general for them, just to even get started, if they have a hard time remembering to use strategies in the moment, because, certainly that can be a big issue with ADHD, anxiety, pretty much any mental health disorder. In the moment, you're not going to think quite as clear that there's something going on. So, what are some ways to help people to kind of incorporate some of this stuff more naturally into their day-to-day life to start?
Yeah. So I think the beautiful thing about the breath is that there's nowhere to breathe except for the present moment. So if you bring your attention to your breath, no matter what is going on for you, you're automatically brought to the present moment. And I think with a lot of executive functioning challenges, you're either in the future or you're in the past, or you're not sure about time. And so, for all of those things, if you simply bring your awareness back to your breath, you're automatically back in the present moment. And if you just track your breath a few times without the need to change or even fix anything, you're automatically recentered to a state and you come back to your body. And I think for a lot of people with executive functioning challenges, they're not embodied. They're constantly outside of their body, thinking about something else or trying to understand what to do next, and organize things. And that's because it's hard for them to organize themselves in space and time. And so the breath is a beautiful way to be able to bring themselves back into their body. So without even going into a specific strategy, simply the first step, I think, is bringing awareness to the breath, because right away that brings you back to the moment, back to your body. And then from there, you can start to develop an intuitive sense and inner wisdom about what you need to do next. I think like you teach these skills to lots of kids, and it's like they have then this whole plethora of skills that they can use, but then they go into the classroom and boom, it's gone. And you're like, what happened? I know you have all of these skills. And the same thing goes for adults. Like, we know what to do. We know when we're anxious, we know we need to do self-care. If we're trying to lose weight, we know how to get there, but there's something getting in the way for us to access that inner wisdom and that inner knowing. And for a lot of people, it's that connection back to themselves. And I think the breath is such a beautiful way to get there, because it allows us to connect our conscious and our unconscious to create a relationship with ourselves that's missing and really access that wisdom that's already there. Did I answer the question? I maybe went a roundabout way.
Oh, no, that was definitely very helpful. I think give listeners, a clearer kind of understanding of it, and some ideas to get started. It also sounds like it's hard though, because I think in some ways, there's this conceptual understanding of what it means in terms of focusing on the breath, but I think in reality, it's also can be hard sometimes for people to think, how do I get started? What do I do with it? Like I think
Yeah.
both in the moment and in general, that especially if you have people, use ADHD an example, both for kids and adults, if they have a hard time focusing. I mean, one of the things I hear quite a bit when I suggest meditation or mindfulness to whether it's a kid or an adult with ADHD
Yeah.
is the fact of, how can I stay focused on this? I can't, have a hard enough time staying focused on day-to-day stuff in general.
Yeah, it's so true. One thing I like to do with kids, I actually have it right here, is I have these little like plus beads. And so as people are just closing their eyes and just tracking their breath. So tracking their breath just sounds like I'm literally saying breath in, breath out to myself. Like I close my eyes, we can practice together, and I just say in, out. And it doesn't matter if it's in through the nose, out through the mouth. We're just tracking our breath. And then if a physical sensation comes up, I have like two little buckets. And I say, if you feel something physical, like an itch or a wind, you put one bead in this bucket. If there's a thought that distracts you, you drop a bead in this bucket. And so just the simple awareness on like, oh, I'm distracted by something physical. Oh, I'm distracted by something in my thoughts. And giving them permission to not make that wrong, not label it, not attach a story to it, but simply like, watch those pieces distract you, then you're automatically becoming the observer, right? And that's what we want to see, is that becoming the observer instead of having no control over what's going on and things are happening to you. You're able to sort of be in that mindfulness state where you're just watching things sort of go by. So I think bringing attention to those two pieces as you work on tracking the breath. And the other thing I'll say to that is, like, not all meditation has to be just sitting down and breathing. Like, yoga is a moving meditation. Like, what you connect one breath to one movement and you just keep going, and eventually you're in this beautiful flow state of moving and breathing and being and becoming. And that goes for, you know, a walk in the park, or when you play music, I see a guitar behind you. Like, those are all also ways to be mindful and meditate and get into that flow state. And when you're in that state, that's sort of when you can access those different pieces.
Well, that's great. Well, I love that strategy, that make it very physical. That,
Yes.
gives people an opportunity to figure out like what is distracting me, but to sort of make it, tangible, and not just, oh, I need to think further about what's distracting me, but actually have like a task to do, like something physical in front of them. And what you also mentioned about the idea of, how it doesn't have to just be, closing your eyes and meditate. Like, I think also creating like, I find sometimes it's helpful for people to have like something that's visual. I mean, even, sometimes using an app like Headspace or Calm, where,
Yeah.
some of them, like especially Headspace, has a couple. I mean, I think they're a little more meant for kids, but, adults can use them too, like cloud breathing, where it's, you kind of, get the visual cue while you're doing it. I think for some people can definitely be very helpful if they have a hard time with auditory tension, in terms of just, even if they're listening to something, if they have to stay focused just on hearing. Because also, people use their senses. You have five senses for a reason. That there are benefits of being able to use more of them when you're doing this kind of stuff, I would imagine, as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think even just like if you can find anything that you can use to focus on, even if you go outside and look at the clouds going by, I think is supportive. And having audio to go along with it. I actually just started The Artist's Way, which is a writing. Every morning I do these morning pages, and I have to write 3 full pages. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is terrible. I'm like writing my grocery list. I'm writing out like what I'm doing for the day. And then eventually, like, a beautiful thing started happening, and it was my morning meditation. And so that sort of also can act in that way, where eventually you just like get clear. And I just started like receiving messages and thinking about like getting clarity on different things, and having that deep connection with yourself also helps to then create space to be able to sit with yourself in a more deep way.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, also the idea that, each person's different. What may work well for one person may not work well for someone else, but the idea is, finding your own routine with it.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think especially for kids, we need to be flexible and know that it's not always going to look the same way as it is for anyone else. And especially in the neurodivergent population, there are different ways that are going to work for different kids and people based on how their brain works and what feels good in their body.
Right. And also, for people to have some autonomy in this, whether, it's a child, or, I mean, obviously adults usually should be making their own decisions on this anyway. But the idea is that if you, try to force something on someone, or even like in something as a family, having buy-in for what may work for that, or for getting them to think, such if it's a kid, I need to, maybe taking a step back and thinking about what could I do to, I want to, let's say, improve X, Y, or Z. Maybe that incorporating this into more routine would be helpful, but instead of saying you have to do this, to say, let's look at what we could do, maybe throw out some ideas, but,
Yeah.
guide them a little bit. But this way it becomes their own routine that they do. Like, if you
Yeah.
can get kids to be able, again, this is probably far easier said than done, but to be able to get them to, in the morning, take a few minutes to get some physical activity in, a minimum, or maybe do a meditation activity, before they go off to school. It
Yeah.
seems like, certainly, I think in theory it could definitely be very helpful. It's a matter of getting the buy-in and the follow through on it.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. And I think that one of the easiest ways that I've found, which is supportive for me and for my family, is really just working on yourself first, because that co-regulation piece is so huge. And so, like, you can't support your child when you're activated. And so when you work on your own nervous system regulation, your child picks up on where your nervous system is in any given state. When you walk into a room, like you can feel the people who are regulated and the people who are activated and the people who are not. And so can your family, your kids are like especially attuned to that. And if you think about like when your babies were like super babies and when you were supposed to like hold them in those like baby Catan or whatever those little carriers were, and they are supposed to be facing you inward so they can learn to pick up on the co-regulation and what your face is doing and what you're sort of putting out energetically. And I think the same goes in a family dynamic. And once your kids can pick up on that piece of like your calm energy, then they're more inclined to do what you're doing. So I think to your point, like let them see you meditating, let them see you mess up and be like, oh, this is challenging. Like, let me try a different way, and troubleshooting all of those things, because that's how they're going to learn to do it. And then one day, like you'll be sitting and meditating. This happened to me the other day. I like to sit in my closet and meditate, which is a little weird, but it's fine. And I have like my red light and my special little crystal mat, and my son just like came in and plopped in and just sat with me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even have to say a word. Like when your kids see you doing these things and see it like making a difference because you're now like calmer and more regulated, first of all, their energy matches your energy. So like they can now attack whatever they needed to from a calm state. And also they are more inclined to do it themselves without you having to say like, hey, let's do this thing. I see you're a hot mess right now.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, that's such a crucial point. The idea that, it's so important not only to sort of model good behavior and actions, but that, your kids pick up on it. And that, if you're reacting very strongly to things or, constantly worried or, anxious, kids are going to pick up on that and feed off of it. It's kind of like if you're having a discussion with someone, if one person starts to get really riled up, there's a good chance the other person will as well. And so because it feeds, you sort of, if you can, it's corny, but it's, it's like the thing with the airplane with, putting the oxygen, your own oxygen mask on first. You have to take care of yourself first
Yeah.
before you can really effectively take care of other people.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's why I think also like the breath work, having adults and parents specifically go in through breathwork journeys and working in a more therapeutic setting with the breath work helps them release old patterns that they picked up as a child, that they, when their needs weren't met, because I think that our children are such big triggers for us because they're activating unresolved issues that we had as a child and an adolescent. And then like our nervous system is sort of trying to like close the loop with our own children as we parent them. So I think it's so important as adults and parents that we take responsibility for our own healing so that we can show up differently for our children and not look to complete those loops with them rather than ourselves.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, and I think another the related piece of this is also if you think about a sense of control, and
Hmm.
that in adults, while you don't have control over everything by any means, the day-to-day stuff, and let's say your own routine, you have more control, for the most part over it in theory than other people do for you. But with kids, you can't really control them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's it's different in that it's sort of by sort of modeling good behavior and working together, you can sort of help them to do in theory what you want them to do. But that it's not like someone magically has control to sort of to say, oh, my child's never gonna have a tantrum.
Yeah, definitely not. And even as adults, I feel like I don't want people telling me what to do, but if I see like we're all over social media, we're seeing all the things, but if I see someone I'm like, "Oh my God, I want a life like that." Like I'm watching what that person's doing, I'm watching how they're talking and what they're into, and I think the same goes for our kids like when they can pick up on like what we're doing that's working well, like they are curious about it too, and they might not like show you and be like, hey, what are you doing, mom, to make that you're so like calm and cool and collected, but they'll notice the different things that you do on a day-to-day basis and be curious about sort of sitting you with you while you're doing that or ask questions. And I think that's also another hugely important skill to teach our kids of like being curious and open and coming to things on their own terms. But to your point, like we can't, the more I tell my kids to do something, the more they're going to do the total opposite of what I say.
Yeah, and I think there's really something to be said to the idea of, modeling and kind of, kids picking up on those things from seeing it as opposed to you saying you could do this or you should do this. Because I think that the second you sort of give a lot of advice, most kids, I think, will often push back a fair amount, or at least or ignore it. But the idea is if you're not pushing it anyway and just you're modeling and they're seeing it, they're gonna, I've seen this quite a bit over the years with, even just organizing stuff as far as, using an Amazon Echo to set reminders or other things that, kids definitely will pick up on it. They'll see how you do it. And then, especially if you don't make a big deal and push them to do it, will often end up at least trying it out themselves and seeing if they like using those reminder systems as one example.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So yeah, so there's definitely a lot to it. And again, I think the idea of the family as a unit,
So
that
true.
that obviously you take care of yourself, but it's also about all the adults in the family and then everyone kind of working together too. So it seems like there's certainly a lot of value of the breath work, as a family too.
Yeah, I definitely think so. The more that I've done breath work to work on my own healing, I definitely have shown up differently in my family. I'm now able to like use my triggers as an opportunity to go deeper into things that are needing to come up for me to grow through. It's been great in having conversations with my whole family to use discomfort as a tool to grow and to move forward, and use fear as an opportunity to see what's next, and to also grow. But I think as I continue to do more work myself, it's definitely allowed me to show up in a different way for my family. And that's been really huge for me. And also for my clients, I feel like the more that they come and do breath work and are more in touch with what they actually need and who they are separate from the family system, and then to be able to take that newfound sort of essence of who they are and authentic self back into the family system. Because I think sometimes for parents we can get lost in like what that looks like, especially moms. And I think being able to sort of identify who you are again after becoming a mother, and then come back into your family system with a new lens of what that looks like and feels like, then you're able to sort of operate in this new upgraded version of yourself and show up in a different way that's more grounded and more able to do the things that you need to do from that lens.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point about that. You can kind of get lost in kind of a role that you're in as looking at how do you sort of make this sort of this is who you are as a person. This is your kind of sort of enhanced version of yourself that incorporates these newer aspects of yourself in terms of being a parent, but still
Mhm.
gets at not losing the essence of who you are as a person.
Yeah, I think that's so hard for so many people. And I know, like, personally for me, becoming a mom, that was like a huge identity shift for me. And then once your kids get a little older and don't need you as much anymore, you're like, okay, wait a second, like, who am I now? Like, I knew who I was in my 20s, and then I had these kids, and my whole life was momming, and now they're a little older, and like, wait, do I still like the things that I used to like? Do I still want to do the things that I used to do? And I think coming to terms with that, and also your kids are getting older, and just there are so many different pieces that you're working through. And for me, going in with the breath and being able to figure those things out and connect more deeply with myself was such a huge turning point for me, because it allowed me to access that inner wisdom that I always had the whole time, and be able to live from that space instead of looking outside for all the answers, because we can find any answer that we want to on social media, on the internet, chat GPT, to go one way or the other. So it's like I'm inundated with all this information of how to be a good mom, how to be a good wife, what to do next, but what do I actually want? And I think it's so easy to get lost in that, in the busyness of what that looks like all around. So to have a way to come back to yourself, I think is really important. And I think the breath is a beautiful way to do that.
Yeah, no, and I think you brought up to me a really important point. The idea, not just sort of a parents are losing themselves, in the situation, but also the idea of, there's so much information out there, and some people are very into, constantly reading, every single article they can on how can I improve. But the thing is, you also have to figure out how do you actually take this information for, make sure it's a legitimate source to begin with. Recognize that, just because someone says, even if they're, a very, credentialed individual who, theoretically, is, backed by, sort of any sort of, scientific sort of, or however you want to sort of say it, the point is that basically one size does not fit all. So, figuring out how best to sort of navigate that and incorporate stuff. Because also, if you try to do too much at once, in most cases, people can't really do anything because it's become so overwhelming. So, taking that one step at a time to figure out what, starting small. So, like if someone wants to start small with breathwork, what would you recommend to them as a starting point?
Yeah, I would suggest as a starting point to find a morning practice. On my website, I actually have a free morning breathwork session, or really anytime, just sort of a reset. So that's available on my website. And like there are tons of apps that have just morning breathwork sessions, which I think are so lovely. Awaken has a beautiful one, it's 5 minutes. And I think just starting a breath work practice that's small, and you don't even have to do it every day, but just seeing how it feels in your body to be able to come to back to yourself, or start the day that way, or have a reset that way. And just it will allow you to start to develop a relationship with staying in your body, and feeling embodied in a different way that will allow you to access the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I think that's a great strategy. I appreciate the suggestion for the place to consult, and I think it's definitely important to start small. And so I think having like, things a couple minutes is, I think it's less daunting for most people than trying to do something that's, 10 or 15 minutes or even longer.
Totally. I definitely would agree with that.
So, yeah. And I guess, is there anything that you feel like is important to share with listeners that we haven't gotten to yet, as far as things about breath work or sort of things that you do, in the field that are helpful to for people to know about if they're, considering, trying this, or, maybe they tried it and kind of lost track of it and want to get back into it.
Yeah. I think just like you said, starting small and finding a breath work style that works for you, someone who you feel attracted to and comfortable with, and starting with a morning breathwork practice or something like that would be a great place to start. And then also, if you're curious about doing a breathwork journey, a group is a great way to start. I do virtual groups, I have in-person groups. There are tons of also different people out there that do different kinds of breathwork journeys. But I think that that's also a beautiful way to sort of get in touch with this other piece, and figure out for you what's getting in the way for you to access all this information that you really already have, and be able to live in a way that's most authentic to you.
Oh, well, it definitely sounds great. And where can listeners find you? I mean, I'll put all the information in the show notes, but in general, like websites, social media, where's the best
Yeah.
place for people to find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Heidi Tacktill, and I also can be found on my website, HeidiTacktill.com, where I post information about upcoming events and things going on, and you can join my newsletter. And as I mentioned, I also have a freebie for a breathwork reset, where you can get an idea of that breathwork pattern. And if you're interested, please do reach out. I would love to support anyone going through anything. Breathwork, again, is such a great way to not only heal like past trauma, and trauma can be anything from, capital T trauma to lowercase t trauma, and also just a way to sort of come back to yourself and navigate, the identity shifts that everybody is going through all of the time, for anxiety, depression, attention and focus. I think so many people walk around just living outside of their bodies these days. And I think the breath brings you right back home to where you need to be.
Oh, well, it sounds like a really great final message for today. We hope that you out there, have found this to be very helpful. If you like the show, definitely like it. Circulate around to friends who you think may benefit from it, and of course, feel free to listen to it more than once as well, because I'm sure there's more you can get out of it. Because this is lots of great information. So thanks a lot for listening, Heidi. Thank you very much for being on the show today. It was great having you on.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. This was great.